So this is the low-priced end of the neighborhood.
One show featuring storytellers Loren Niemi and Howard Lieberman, State Senator Steve Cwodzinski, and the Abiders, live at last. This is Democratic Visions with Jeff Strait.
And Ken says, we're here to see Dorothy. They say, well, she's in the kitchen. So we go into the kitchen, and there's Dorothy Day sitting in the kitchen with a pile of potatoes, and she's peeling.
Minneapolis-based author and storyteller Loren Niemi shares perspectives injected with irony, the human condition, and humor.
He's a religious, and she looks at me, and he says, he's one of those religious, and she says, oh.
Loren performs solo and with Howard Lieberman on stages here and around the country. Before the pandemic, they appeared on Democratic Visions. We'll hear from Howard in a few minutes. COVID-19 variants are still in the air.
So I've been thinking about the pandemic, grief in the pandemic. We are experiencing grief. The obvious one is that 600,000 plus people have died. And for everyone who died, there is a connection, a web, a network, relationships, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, children, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. It doesn't make any difference whether you're part of the young cohort or the old cohort. When you die, the people who knew you and who loved you, the people who had you as part of their lives, enter into a state of grief. And that grief is total and personal. That grief has an effect. It takes years to come to grips with it. You don't end grief, you just make your accommodation. So there's that grief. And when you think about how the grief comes to you after a single person dies, when you begin to multiply that by 600,000, 700,000, however many will come with the next wave, we are a nation that is in the state of grief, whether we acknowledge it or not. It affects our willingness to spend, our willingness to buy, our willingness to put in time, because we need time to heal. There's a second kind of grief. This is the grief of that fact that it will not go back to as it was. Whether or not it should go back to as it was is immaterial at the moment. It will not go back to what it was simply because the pandemic has proved the falsity of our culture. It has proved that we cannot simply consume. We cannot simply go on. Work has changed. How we live has changed. And it will continue to change. The year we lost has shifted the way we think about it. And there is that grief of that lost year. There is that grief of masking. There is the grief of social distancing. There is the grief of not being able to do what we used to do. And we're not going to be able to do it again. That's the plain and simple fact. We can go back to something, but it will not be what it was, because what it was built upon a false idea. The idea that we didn't have to question. The idea that things were as they should be. But things were not as they should be. We are living in a world of climate collapse. We are living in a world of economic disturbance, of inequality. And the pandemic has proved that. And the grief that's attached to that can only be mitigated by our discovery of what is next. Something that hopefully is more socially equitable, something that's more just, something that's more based on the common good or community. There's a story. A man is lost in the woods. He goes this way and he goes that way. He is traveling around trying to find his way out, and he cannot find his way out of the woods. But every path leads to confusion, and he does not know what to do until finally he looks and he sees another man. He goes, "Oh, thank God you're here." And the other man says, "Thank God you're here." He says, "Do you know the way out?" He says, "Oh no, I've been lost here for many years." And the first man begins to lament, "Oh, what are we to do? What are we to do?" And the second man says, "Well, I don't know necessarily what is the way out, but I know which paths don't lead there." There is a third kind of grief, and this grief is the most difficult and the most personal of all. This is the grief of ourselves understanding that the world has changed, that we have changed. This is the grief of our understanding that we have to let go of our expectations or our assumptions. One of those assumptions is that everyone is good. One of those assumptions is that people will pursue the common good. One of those assumptions is that charity will reign. We see that there are whole sets of people who, for whatever reason, because of politicalization, because of fear, because of who knows what, have decided that their selfishness, their freedom, trumps that of others. These are the people who, for whatever reason, will not mask, will not social distance, will not vaccinate. And because they will not, for their own reasons, put the rest of us at risk, propel the pandemic further and further and further and further into the future. And the profound disappointment that I feel about that, the sadness I feel that they cannot see how they damage themselves and everyone else by those choices, is a grief that will take, how do I even begin to express it? And there are two things I think we need to acknowledge. One of them is that we need to find ways of dealing with grief personally, of making accommodation. And the other is that we need to do something collectively. Realistically, we need a national day of mourning. We need a ritual of mourning that we can all participate in, where we can say, here are the ashes of the past, and bless ourselves, bless each other. Let those ashes go to the air, or to the ground, or to the water. The second thing is that we need to find those moments where we can find joy. Those moments in the middle of all of this. Something which is beauty, something which is charm, something which is meaningful. I have a second story. A good one, a metaphoric story, as they all are. So don't necessarily need to take it too literally, although it is an apt description of our circumstance. There's a man who's walking along, minding his own business, when he hears a movement behind him, and he turns and he looks and he sees there's a tiger. Caution says that he should walk a little faster, lest the tiger notice him. And so he picks up his pace. He begins to walk a little faster, but the tiger does notice him. And the tiger, who is either curious or hungry, we don't know which, begins to follow the man. The man picks up his pace. The tiger, thinking it's a game or perhaps sensing a quarry, picks up his pace. The man begins to run. The tiger lopes along after him, getting closer but not quite to him. The man comes to a cliff. He grabs hold of a vine. He throws himself over the edge of the cliff. The tiger comes to the edge of the cliff and looks down at the man. The man looks up at the tiger. He looks down, and it's a long way down. At the bottom of the cliff, there are sharp rocks. If he lets go, it is death. If he goes up, it is death. What is he to do? And as he's sitting there thinking about it, hanging on the vine with the tiger above and the sharp rocks below, he turns and he sees to the side wild strawberries growing. He lets go of the vine and he picks one and he tastes it. And he says, "Ah, how good it is." This is what we want. That in the midst of the coronavirus, in the midst of a collapsing economy, a collapsing culture, a collapsing environment, we hang by the thinnest of vines. And we are looking around. Where are the wild strawberries? What is it that we can pick and taste? What is it that we can say, "Ah, this is good"?
So this is the low-priced end of the neighborhood, mostly.
Loren Niemi's latest book, What Haunts Us, is inspired by true ghost stories he's heard around the Midwest, or amplified by his own imagination.
Extraordinarily.
Book people know where to find good books, online and in shops.
Things are not wholly bad. They're not wholly good.
Howard Lieberman and his wife Pat live in Stillwater. Their home overlooks Lily Lake and a lot of trees.
They paid for that.
It's a little more than a mile from the St. Croix River. Howard and his improv partner, Loren Niemi, have not performed together since the start of the pandemic. Before he could get his shots last winter, the COVID-19 virus attacked him. He's recovered from a very tough fight. Howard Lieberman is back on the high wire of cultural and political commentary.
You know what? I feel pretty good. I feel very good.
And damn it, Howard is almost huggable.
People are seeing the Delta variant of the coronavirus spreading all over. It's spreading more easily than, was it chickenpox or measles or one of those, and record numbers of people are sick. They would say, Howard, there is nothing positive about this. But I say yes. Things are so divided. Health is so precarious. People's ability to pay bills is so challenged right now that I think people on both sides of the aisle are pulling back slightly and saying, wait a minute, what can we do as a community of human beings to survive this? What do we need to do so we don't, as a human race, mutually destroy each other? And so, if you look at the polls, Donald Trump's popularity is waning. If you look at the polls, the most extreme suggestions on the left, like Israel shouldn't exist, which I think is very extreme, are waning. People are saying, take a deep breath, recognize our common humanity, and let's figure out how to get back to normally disagreeing, to a place where we can be concerned about each other's well-being, not agree on how to get to where we need to get, but understand that we are human. My wife Pat and I left New York City and moved to Minnesota in 1990. I looked at Minnesota as paradise. What I like is really all these different colors. This is the best time of year. I looked at Minnesota as a place where there was progressive politics, but yet people across the aisle liked each other, could discuss their differences over coffee. I like winter. What you see behind me looks beautiful in winter. And as a place where I could raise my child without having to worry too much that at any moment she could be in jeopardy. Now people say to me, okay, Howard, here it is, 2021. And with all the bad things that have happened, Minnesota's in the news a lot, and it's not always that positive. How do you feel now, Mr. I'm moving to paradise? Well, you know what? I feel pretty good. I feel very good. There are still a lot of people here, whether or not they disagree, can talk like friends, can share a cup of coffee with each other, go out for a meal. That's still here. Now, are our politics as progressive as I thought they would be, or as much as they were progressive when I first arrived? No. But you know what? There's still a feeling in Minnesota that you can take what divides us. Put that all aside and join hands across the aisle to make all of our lives, all of our common humanity better. And I don't regret moving here for 1 minute. I go down to the coffee shop and have a cup of coffee and see the people with whom I don't agree usually happy to see me. And I take joy in that. I look at the little things to provide me solace in a difficult time. Oh, I'm not Pollyanna. I can see the big things that are bad. I think the environment is a pigsty, and it's getting worse. I see people tearing down political signs off my lawn and shouting racist slurs at me. And I think, okay, they're not happy. They're afraid. But maybe, if we sat down across the street in the park, had a sandwich together and a cup of coffee, we'd find the common humanity between us. And that's what gives me joy. If you look around and stop seeing the big picture all the time and just look for the little things, the micro things, you'll find joy.
The Abiders, my favorite blues band, had a live gig on the 3rd of August, their first since February 2020. Social distancing had muffled the fun for the band and their fans. But at a block party on Osceola Street in St. Paul on National Night Out, the Abiders cranked it up. Here's a sample of the wonderfulness.
All right, so this song is kind of got a lot of solos in it. We get to do a lot of solos, and everybody gets to play a little bit of something. So it's called Milk and Honey. 2, 1, 2, 3. Wake up in the morning and your hair's all a mess. Stumble out of bed about a half undressed. Going to the kitchen, you fire up the pot. Can't wait to see what you put in my cup. A little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. I'm gonna sweeten it fine. Dark outside, you sip over the dog. You say a few choice words and then you laugh out loud. You hear yourself something down beside my head. I reach over, pull you back into bed for a little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. I'm gonna sleep it fine. That first taste is kinda creamy and warm, just a little bit of sweet on the end of my tongue. I wrap my arms around you, I hold you a while. This is a way to start a day with a smile, with a little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. A little milk and honey. I'm gonna sweeten it fine. Oh, Carlos!
Well, While driving home to Eden Prairie on the 1st of August with my wife, I was awestruck by the number of wind turbines north of Albert Lea in Freeborn County. Minnesota ranks 8th in the nation for operating and storing renewable energy. 21% of our electricity is generated from wind and sunlight. Renewable energy here has sparked $10 billion in capital investment. You know, I saw hope in the corn and soybean fields in southern Minnesota. We're reducing our addiction to fossil fuels and making a buck or two. But a few days later, as pollinators flitted about our garden, a United Nations panel on climate change published an alarming report. My Earth-friendly State Senator Steve Cwodzinski came over to talk about it. Well, have a chair. Here's a chair over there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Steve. Again, thanks for being here. Earlier this week, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a statement that is, well, it's more than just a warning. The report of IPCC scientists and policymakers states that they are in accord that global temperatures are higher now than they've been in the past 125,000 years. That drought, fires, heavy rains, and flooding will be more frequent, and that we are running out of time. They also said, it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, the ocean, and the land. Your reaction?
As you know, as people that came of age in the 60s, I thought, we had this environmental stuff down. I thought we realized the errors of our ways, and that we were going to leave this world a better place than we found it for our descendants. And now here we are 50 years later, going through the same issues that we should have dealt with over the last 50 years. It's a bummer. It's the news is disheartening that we are dealing with this. And so at an international level, the Trump administration, dropping us out of the Paris climate agreement, that didn't serve us well as a nation or as a world. I think at the Biden administration's getting back on it. On a state level, there is so much we can do. For instance, moving forward on the electric low emission vehicles and zero emission vehicles, trying to get more of those available to consumers. There's a lot we can do, but the thing that bums me out the most about this whole thing is there was a fellow senator on the floor of the Minnesota Senate said we shouldn't be guided by science. And I thought, as a 62-year-old, what kind of an outlandish statement, we shouldn't be guided by science. We should be totally guided by science in our decision making. So I don't know. But I know there's a lot more we can do, and we're going to get it right because, as you said, Jeff, the world is on fire, literally, and there's a lot of work to be done that we have to move forward on.
Guess what? The Alliance for Community Media has honored Democratic Visions as the best community access series in the country. We are humbled and honored. And we do this thing without a budget.
Thank you for watching. Remember, be active and smile some.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel. This is Carol Sundstrom.